Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to episode 19 of the ESG Show. So Apple thinks ESG is profitable. That is my 5-word summary of what I think of the Apple Mother Earth ad, which I suspect many people watching the show have seen. Today, we're going to be asking our guests for their 5-word description, but that is not all. We want to extend that invite to you. So please, 5-word away. If you have got something to say about that advert, please post it on the comments section of the show in less than 5 words, or we might forgive you if you do it in 6. Please no expletives, and we will endeavour to show it during the course of the show. Okay, so today the UK Prime Minister has cunningly borrowed from the blockbusters and Kodak approach to disruptive technology and decided to delay the ban on new petrol and diesel cars from 2030 to 2035. A good move that, as blockbusters and Kodak will testify. Burying your head in the sand over disruptive tech is a very smart thing to do. Also today, I read the cheerful news that everyone in Europe is breathing toxic air. But I have some very exciting news to share with you today, and you will all be able to breathe in nothing less than metaphorical fresh air as you listen to the ESG show. In fact, today on the ESG show, we have 2 professors and a PhD and me, or to put it another way, we have 3 brains and a small brain, aka 2 professors, a PhD and me. Apologies if you're seeing a bit of black mark on my forehead, by the way. That's not what I look like. It's not a blemish on my skin. It's a blemish on something to do with my computer. Today we're talking about climate literacy, SASB, and sustainability management framework. But before we get started, I wanted to tell you about the results of a survey we conducted. We asked, which reporting framework do you believe has the most effective impact upon companies' ESG and sustainability matters? And the response, 75% elected for Global Reporting Initiative, 12% SASB, 10% UN Global Compact, and 3% Carbon Disclosure Project. And we had some comments from that. Katrina Clullow commented, I think that there needs to be more awareness about all these issues so that small companies understand them and how they can make a difference. We have another comment as well here, which I'm just going to endeavour to find for you, and I will read it to you. Mark Vernave, I hope I pronounced that correctly, said ESG is too much focused on financial risks, so that is more suitable for big corporations. Okay. GRE is a reporting tool that suits more SMEs, as it helps understand more on how average day activities can impact society and environment. This would then allow the SDGs targets to be incorporated in its final reporting, finding solutions as well as it could directly make a difference. A lot of acronyms there, and I'm sorry to say we're going to have a few acronyms in today's show, but I do agree with the gist of that, which is it's fine if you're a large company and you've got the infrastructure and the expertise in place to deal with this stuff, but it's slightly harder if you're a small company. Anyway, that's enough from me. Let's meet the guests. And today on the ESG show, we're joined by Professor Petra Molthan-Hill.
Yes,
hello
everyone.
How are you today?
I'm fine, thanks. I'm really excited to be here.
Well, we're delighted to have you. So Professor Molthan-Hill, have I said that correctly, Molthan-Hill? Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah, it's fine.
Is co-chair of the UN PRME Working Group on Climate Change, professor at NTU, which I think stands for Nottingham Trent University. Is that right?
Yeah.
She's the author of the Handbook of Carbon Management, a step-by-step guide to high-impact climate solutions for every manager in every function, and editor of Sustainability Management, a complete guide for faculty and students. She is an international multi-award winning expert for climate change mitigation tools, leads the climate literacy training CLTECOS distributed worldwide with QS Impact and Prime, and has worked with SMEs and many organisations such as the NHS on how to reduce greenhouse emissions. From 2013 to 2021, she led the Green Academy at the Nottingham Trent University, integrating with her team the SDGs into the curriculum of every discipline across the university. Can you just remind us what SDG stands for?
The Sustainable Development Goals.
Okay, thank you for that. And before we ask you anything else, do you have any thoughts about the Apple ad in the Apple Mother Earth ad in ideally in no more than 5 words?
The 5 words will be difficult, but I showed it to my son who is 17, and he kind of started greenwashing, and gave lots of reasons why it's greenwashing. So this is a voice from someone younger than me, kind of.
Okay, so that's 6 words: greenwashing, and greenwashing. Oh, 7 words if you include the and. Okay. So, Professor, you and I, we're going to be talking about climate literacy shortly. But before we get started, I wanted to make an observation and get your thoughts. I'm forever hearing different reasons why climate change isn't the issue we are told. There's the greening argument, I think it's called, which is the argument that increases in CO2 in the atmosphere makes the planet greener, which in turn absorbs CO2. Then there's another one I read recently about the changes in the polar vortex will lead to lower temperatures. And there are many others. I hear these arguments all the time. And when discussing climate change with cynics, it can be quite hard to respond when they keep throwing up new theories you may not have heard of. As someone who is an expert on climate literacy, how do we respond when that happens?
I always respond with asking for the scientific article, because I think it's really important to actually see the science behind the argument someone is making. And then often I kind of go through it if there is actually a scientific article. So quite often there is nothing behind it. It's just a statement someone has heard somewhere on the internet or in television, so they can't actually bring some facts. But I think what's the best thing is really that everyone has a really good understanding of climate change science. So, for example, in all our trainings, we always have 1 hour. I think 1 hour is enough to understand the most important things. And then I think people are able to actually say, oh, this is not true, this is not true, this is not true by themselves. So I think doing climate literacy is, I think, the one way of actually working with all these arguments. So, for example, we have a course, a Climate Literacy and Action for All, which is a free online course, and I think which gives people enough, it's only 6 hours, but you get a good understanding of the science, but especially on the solution, because for me, the most important is that people understand the solutions.
Well, absolutely, I agree with that. And a few hours doesn't seem to be a bad investment to understand the core issues. Well, thank you very much for that. And we'll see you again shortly. Also joining us on the show today is our second professor, Professor Kevin Haines. Hello. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you.
And Professor Haines, do you mind if I call you Kevin?
No, Kevin, please.
Well, that will be my pleasure. And do you have any thoughts about the Apple advert?
I thought it's very slick marketing, but incredibly shallow on content.
Slick marketing, shallow on content. I made that 5 words. Thank you for that. So Professor Kevin Haines is Bedford Row's Capital Head of Social Policy and focus on leading the firm's ESG offering, developing due diligence processes to identify ESG compliant firms looking to issue debt securities, and communicating the firm's approach on ESG to investors. He previously led a distinguished and influential academic career as a criminologist, specializing in children and crime for over 30 years, and most recently led the criminology department at the University of Trinidad and Tobago, before that the University of Swansea. Swansea, that's interesting. So I know somebody else who's in this two-way conversation who went to university in Swansea and studied economics. And my main memory of my 3 years at Swansea was it rained an awful lot.
You must have been in a different Swansea to me, Michael. The sun always shines in Swansea.
Right, okay, I believe that. And I've just seen a donkey walk by with bells on it as well. In addition to his high-profile project, Kevin also led a high-profile project with the UK's former Department for International Development, informing the children's criminal justice system in Romania. So Kevin is a professor in criminology. Kevin, professor in criminology to head of social policy. That's an interesting pivot. How did you get from criminology to ESG?
There's a lot of criminology that we need to bring to the debates about ESG, because so much of what we're doing wrong is criminal. That, however, is not the kind of criminology that I do. My work has been focused on children and crime, and underpins the current approach in England and Wales to dealing with children in conflict with the law. But in terms of ESG, I think the kind of skills that you develop as an academic, ability to read a lot of information, to assimilate it, to make sense of it, to communicate it to others, is really important and very valuable in today's environment, where we're seeing a burgeoning of regulatory frameworks. And I think that's what we're going to be talking about. So it's the skills that you bring as an academic to ESG that provides the linkage.
Okay, so thank you for that. And also today, Kevin, we're going to be talking about SASB. And we're going to be defining that in a little bit of depth a bit later on. But for those who are not familiar, can you just very, very briefly outline what SASB is?
It's the Sustainable Accounting Standards Board, and they have developed 77 sector-specific standards to supplement IFRS 1 and 2, with the aim of providing investors with consistent and comparable information when making investment decisions.
Okay, thank you for that. And I hope you're not going to tell us what all those 77 standards are today. No. Okay, well that's be grateful for that. Thank you very much, and we'll see you again in just 2 or 3 minutes. Also on the show today, we're welcoming back a returning guest, Dr. Raj. Welcome back to the ESG Show.
Oh, thank you, Michael, and hello to all of our guests and audiences. So we are going to discuss some important issues today that are affecting us all, and I look forward to sharing my views on those as well.
Thank you for that. And do you have any thoughts about the Apple Mother Earth ad in 5 words, if possible?
I thought it was an ESG communication that was very strategically crafted. But I will also add that this is where shadow reporting comes in handy. So shadow reporting is a technique that we talk about in our book on sustainability management with Petra.
Okay, thank you for that. So Dr. Biswaraj Ghosh is an award-winning sustainability ESG strategy consultant, advising clients on sustainable solutions in ESG risk disclosure, governance, climate and decarbonisation with over 10 years of experience. He has held several roles at the University of Nottingham and Nottingham Trent University, UK, including that of a researcher, co-author, PhD scholar and sustainability lecturer. He also served as a visiting scholar at the University of Kassel, Germany, and as a researcher at the University of Derby, UK. As a Parlia mentor, he delivered a social integration project under the guidance of a serving British MP. He's also a mentor to the aspiring students and professionals entering the sustainability space. Dr. Raj has also published book chapters and articles on management controls for sustainability in several journals. His latest co-author publication on the topic of sustainable management was released in August. Was that correct? Was it released last month?
Yeah.
In his free time, Dr. Raj enjoys cooking, traveling, gardening, and photography. Tell me out of interest, because I believe you're actually talking from India at the moment.
Yeah.
How's climate change manifesting itself in India?
I would say it's turning out to be a hot topic in India at the moment, especially led by both macro level and micro level actors. And I think it's an institutionalized approach as well. I say this because the government of India has enacted a separate Ministry of Climate Change, clubbed with the Ministry of Environment and Forest Management. Most of the Indian states have their own climate action plans. and some cities and municipalities have formulated their own city-based action plans as well on climate change. For example, Ahmedabad is one of the few cities in Asia that has its own heat wave action plan. Similarly, in my capacity as a consulting manager, I can see more and more client companies coming to us to help them assess their climate-related transitional and physical risks, and asking us to formulate climate change strategies and risk mitigation strategies. On the other hand, I would also like to point out the impact of climate change is clearly visible. Tangibly, it's very much felt in India, with Ahmedabad, for example, facing intense heat waves since 2018, Mumbai facing a chronic flood risk with some of its land projected to go underwater by 2050. Chennai and Bangalore, other metropolitan cities, are facing cyclonic weather, thunderstorms, rain-induced floods, and so on. So yes, climate change is becoming a topic of interest for many, with Indian universities gearing up to incorporate sustainability as one of the key subjects to study and discuss among students.
Okay, thank you for that. And just one more quick question for you.
And
Is
so,
there
yeah.
acceptance of climate change in India? I mean, in places like the United States, it appears opinion is pretty much split on whether it's actually a thing or not. Is it a divisive issue like that in India as well?
I will say no. I would say it's becoming a binding factor. It's bringing more and more people across generations to do more to protect the planet and our land. So, for example, EVs are already becoming a commonplace. There are more people who are interested in saving water bodies, ponds, and engage in regenerative practices. We also see a few institutions, organizations coming forward for afforestation practices. And climate change and environment is becoming a common theme also during India's religious festivals. So I would say it's actually a binding factor in India rather than a divisive issue.
Okay, so thank you for that. Now, we're going to be returning to that part of the show where we have a look at recent editorial, some recent articles in publications. And we start, I think Petra and Kevin will be joining us back on screen in a second. And we start with one for you, Kevin, because it ties in with ISSB. The real objective of ESG is profitability. That's an article in Yahoo Finance. But it's a particular sentence in that article which leapt out at me. It says, don't get involved trying to check the box of reporting framework if it's not creating value. Reporting frameworks like SSA, SASB, all of those are really helpful, but they go at the back of your sustainability report. To me, that's the ESG of your sustainability report. Your sustainability report is your roadmap. So, Kevin, do you have any thoughts about this?
I think what this article and this particular quotation is trying to get at is that you shouldn't focus your ESG efforts on hitting all of the metrics, but you need to have a narrative journey defined. What we talk about would be a transition report or a transition strategy. So it's the strategy, it's what you're going to do as a business that you put to the forefront of your relations with employees and customers, and the metrics will follow that. So it's a question of the order in which you do these things. Get the strategy right, and the metrics will follow. Try to be dominated by the metrics, and the strategy just falls away.
Okay.
I would agree with that. You have to have a strategy, and you have to be clear about that, and you have to communicate that, and then the metrics will follow from that. But you shouldn't try to just hit the metrics. That's pointless.
Okay, don't be a slave to the metrics. Okay. Petra, have you got any thoughts on this, on the broader context of that article about ESG is about profitability?
Yeah, I think I would only partly agree with the statement, because I think with the ESG is also about profitability, and I think with a lot of the carbon reduction measurements, for example, you can save money at the same time. So it is kind of helping the board, and therefore a lot of companies who actually have very, very strong climate targets, carbon targets, and carbon strategy, and so on, are actually very profitable as well, because it's linked. It's a good way of dealing with the resources and everything. However, I think we need to make decisions, and companies need to make decisions which will not be profitable. As I think we can't just say, okay, we only do profitable. And I'm really hoping that the companies are starting to communicate to their shareholders that actually certain things need to be done, and there might be a reduction in profits for the shareholders as well, because for our all benefit, for the survival of humankind in this kind of sense. So I think it is important to me.
Okay, thank you for that. Dr. Raj, have you got anything to add?
Yeah, I just want to add to that. It is the backbone of a purposeful profitability and a responsible capitalist society. So any corporate action should not erode value for its different stakeholder groups, and it should not produce negative externalities that is going to be harmful for different stakeholders as well as the environment. So it can become the backbone of a purposeful profitability framework and a responsible capitalist society as a paradigm.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for that. So now we turn to a story in IR magazine. And again, it's one for you, Kevin. ISSB calls for SASB standards to be made globally applicable. Kevin, thoughts about that?
ISSB, IFRS, and SASB is really a holy trinity. It's one thing, separated into three different parts. And the ISSB is tremendously influential globally. There's a lot of very powerful actors supporting ISSB. And the whole intention behind their approach is to provide these consistent standards that everybody can adhere to. So, of course, they're calling for the standards to be made globally applicable, because that's their goal.
Okay, thank you for that. Dr. Raj, an Indian perspective on whether SASB needs to be rolled out globally.
Okay, sure, certainly. So you see, SASB offers more specific, dedicated, and granular level reporting requirements that are aligned with the intricacies of particular industries and sectors. You see, the requirements of a manufacturing company would be different from that of a mining or a service-oriented company. So SASB builds upon the differences that exist between different sectors, and these are reflected in the types of KPIs that are measured based on a given SASB sector-specific guideline. In India, though, we have our own reporting framework in the form of the BRSR that has been enacted by the Securities Exchange Board. And GRI remains the most acclaimed ESG reporting mechanism in India also. But I strongly believe SASB will complement any reporting framework because of its unique selling point, as the KPIs are designed based on the needs of specific sectors and industries. So in GRI, we see standardized KPIs, but in SASB, the difference is these KPIs are aligned with the requirements of a given sector or an industry. So I believe that this will complement Indian BRSR very well going in the future. Over to you, Michael.
Thank you very much. I thought I could just quickly mention a few comments that we've had already. And Christopher Bullock says, I disagree that ESG focuses purely on financial risk. We need to see the creation of experts in each element of ESG, as well as developing a deep knowledge of holistic ESG methodologies. Again, Christopher Bullock once again, do we need more contribution from scientists and academics within the corporate mindset, embedding the principles of PPP and the circular economy? Your thoughts? Just make this one a quick one. Can you just give me like 2 seconds of thoughts on that question? Petra, do you want to kick off? Well, I'll tell you what, I'll leave that one for you to think about. Anyone else want to have a go at answering that question?
I think it's difficult to answer it in 2 seconds. But
okay, I'll give you longer.
The whole field of ESG is so complicated. that if you're going to make any progress, you need to draw on the broadest possible set of knowledge that exists. And that means bringing academics, bringing finance experts, bringing people, bringing children into these conversations. It's not going to be solved by a group of powerful elite, grey-suited wearing men. That's the wrong way to think about it. We need to be much more inclusive. And specialist knowledge is absolutely essential as part of that journey. That wasn't 4 seconds, but that's a brief.
Great, thank you. That's great. Scott Severite, a former guest on the show and a future guest on the show, says all the data shows that companies with strong ESG are more purposeful and profitable and good for the planet. So it's not so much a question, a statement, which I think a lot of people here would agree with. Venkat Krishnan says, why has the ISSB not partnered with ISO to formulate global standards and also guide in implementation? Anyone want to have a go at answering that question?
I could say something controversial.
Go on. I like controversy.
ISSB is out to conquer the world. They don't want to cooperate with anybody else. They want to be the dominant people. So of course they don't cooperate. Let them do that.
Okay, they're empire builders. All right, fine. Thank you for that. Now we turn to an article in The Guardian. Australia is replacing its retiring coal power stations with small nuclear reactors. But the article is saying this could cost $387 billion. I think the article is saying they should be using renewables instead. Excuse me, Petra, any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think it's a wrong approach. A lot of countries are taking that. They think nuclear is a kind of net zero solution, because I think what they don't put into the calculation is that you actually have to make the nuclear reactor, and there's a lot of embodied carbon, and embodied carbon means there's a lot of carbon emissions while you are constructing such a nuclear reactor, and this is often not calculated in. So actually by doing this, we are first emitting a lot more emissions before the nuclear reactor is even running. And then obviously once it's running, it's kind of a bit more better because it's emitting less. But on the other hand, we have still the nuclear waste to deal with and things like this. So I think overall, I think it's a very bad solution. And I think with renewable energies, with all the different forms we have, it's a much, much better solution. So I think countries should not go for nuclear energy at all. They should go straight for the renewable energies. And we have all the solutions on how to make it work. There's no problem anymore at all to have for a whole country to have all the energy needs met with renewables.
Thank you for that, and I agree with that comment. When I look at the cost of nuclear and how long it takes to build new nuclear power stations, I do get a little suspicious when people suggest nuclear power as a solution. It seems to me like an excuse to delay. But anyhow, now we're turning to that show when I'm going to be talking to one of our guests, and I'm going to kick off with Kevin. Hello again, Kevin, and we're going to be talking about SASB, and I thought I would give a little quick recap as to what it is. So the SASB standards identify the sustainability related issues most relevant to investor decisions making in 77 industries. The SASB standards provide detailed additional topic subject criteria against which businesses should report supplementary to those in the IFRS 1 and 2 standards, International Financial Reporting Standards. It's going to feel like we've been shopping at acronyms are us today, I think. The relationship of the SASB standards to IFRS standards is basically the same as the relationship between EU CRSD and the ESRS regulations, Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directives, and European Sustainability Reporting Standards. The IFRS SASB standards are advisory only and must be operational within domestic law regulations to come into force. The purpose of IFRS and SASB standards is for companies to provide standardized sustainability information that can facilitate investor decision making. The EU regulations, on the other hand, are standards that all in scope companies must comply with. They're also relevant to reporting requirement of investors. Okay, so Kevin, I know we touched on this just now, but what is the purpose of SASB? And can you talk to me a little bit about materiality versus double materiality?
Yeah, sure. I think the materiality versus double materiality issue is the biggest issue that the ISSB approach faces. Materiality is sometimes called financial materiality, and it's focused entirely on the potential impact of environmental, natural, or human factors on a business's continued sustainability. Double materiality, on the other hand, takes that into account, but it also looks at the impact that the business has on environment, nature, and human populations. So it takes an input and an output look on double materiality, whereas financial materiality is just the impact on sustainability, environmental factors. The problem with that is that this is intended to be helpful to investors when they're making investment decisions. Now, most of the investors that I've encountered, and most of the people that are seeking investment, they want to know about double materiality. And so I wonder whether trying to satisfy all of the kind of constituent political and governmental interests, IFRS has attempted, or ISSB has attempted to find a solution, but they've ended up satisfying no one in that process, because no financial materiality doesn't cut the mustard. When we're talking about companies and we're talking about investors, I think it's really important for them. These are people. They're human beings who live in the world that we all live in. So they're very much interested in the greater good of the world that we're in. Yes, of course, they're trying to make money. That goes without saying. But they're not trying to do that in a way that is just kind of blind to the consequences of their decision making. So that's why I think double materiality has come to the fore. And I think the ISSB may be missing a trick here.
Okay, thank you for that. Before we move on, we've had a comment from Nadim Shakur, who said, I see the SASB standards as a helpful step forward, though not a complete solution. As with any reporting framework, the quality of disclosure depends on the integrity of those applying it. Responsible investors must still scrutinize reports and demand robust decision-useful data. Companies too must go beyond minimum reporting requirements if they wish to properly account for their full impacts. A combination of rigorous standards, transparency, verification, and stakeholders. Now, have you got any thoughts on that comment there?
Yeah, the real problem, it starts to get very technical, but the real problem with this is that the SASB approach is based on hard metrics. And if you restrict yourself to hard metrics, then you're only being able to report on things that you can measure. Whereas the EU approach, and certainly the approach taken by GRI, is to include a lot more contextual information. If you're restricting yourself to hard metrics, then you're only ever going to look at the things that you're set out to measure, so financial materiality. So bringing in all of the other stuff is going to be really difficult and an extra burden and not a requirement. So why would you do it? Whereas I think what people are looking for is more contextual information in addition to the double materiality aspect of reporting. But it's
okay.
just on metrics, they hamstring themselves.
Okay, thanks for that. By the way, I did cut Nadim off slightly. Nadim said a combination of rigorous standards, transparency, and verification of stakeholders' engagement is key to realising the potential of ESG reporting. So sorry about that. And Scott Severite said, I suspect ESG is very interlinked and complex, more than just a complicated one. Complicated problems need experts and experience, but complex ones need experiments and new thinking to navigate. I think at times we underestimate the connectedness, but that's a question we'll ask the panel a bit later if we have time. Can you tell me, Kevin, how do SASB standards compare to ESRS regulations?
The SASB standards provide sector-specific additional requirements to the IFRS standards. In the EU, the approach, first of all, it's a double materiality approach. And the ESRS standards provide sector-specific additional requirements supplementary to the CSRD, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. The difference being in the EU, it only applies to companies that are in scope, but it is a regulation. It's a requirement. It's not a voluntary thing. If you're in the EU, you must comply with this. But also, if you're a smaller company that's not currently in scope, but you're seeking investment, then you ought to be looking at CSRD and the ESRS standards to provide the kind of information that investors are looking for.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you, Kevin. If we get time, we'll have you. Oh, you're back on again in a minute shortly when you're going to be talking to Dr. Raj. And then hopefully we'll have enough time to get you all back on screen right at the end to deal with any more questions that we have. But now I'm going to be talking to Professor, to Petra. Hello again, Petra. We're going to be discussing climate literacy. First, I'll read a definition which I nabbed from one of your recent talks. The definition of carbon literacy is an awareness of the carbon dioxide costs and impacts of everyday activities and the ability and motivation to reduce emissions on an individual, community and an organizational basis. So why is climate literacy important, do you think?
Yeah, I think climate literacy is important really because a lot of people have only this half kind of understanding. So, for example, a lot of people will have heard that we should now actually buy electric cars. But for example, if you buy electric SUVs, you're actually making a big mistake and you're actually causing more emission. We are causing worldwide more emissions than if we would keep with our petrol cars at the moment, for example. So I think there's a lot of things where people have understood a little bit, but they haven't understood the full picture. And I think it's really important that people get this climate literacy at least. And it was talked also on the slide you just shared. It was actually referring to the Carbon Literacy Project. And it's an initiative in Manchester who said actually we need all about 8 hours to actually understand it well enough to do the right things. Otherwise, everyone will be very wanting to do the right thing, but will do something wrong without really knowing it, kind of.
Okay, thanks for that. Now, the thing about climate literacy, I think a lot of the terminology can be quite confusing for the consumer. I mean, I'm interested in this stuff, and I get confused. I mean, it's hard enough explaining to you what the difference between gigawatt and gigawatt hours is. But then when you talk about X many million tons of carbon dioxide, but what does that really mean? It sounds a lot, but what does that mean in context? So it seems to me it's very confusing. How do we address this, do you think?
For me, it's that I think it's to actually give comparison to other measurements. For example, if I go back to the SUV, to how much it's actually causing. If you buy an SUV, it's about 25 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent emissions, and you might say 25 tons doesn't sound so bad. It's not many. But if I then tell you actually that the average person in the UK, for example, causes about 8 tons for the whole year. And this person actually causes the 8 tons for everything they do. So they kind of eat from it, they kind of warm their houses, they buy computers, everything they do, they travel and so on, is about 8 tons. Buying one car without even having driven it a mile, you have just bought this car and it stands on your driveway, it's 25 tons. I think then you get a bit of a feeling, actually, maybe this is a bit too much when I do this, because Obviously, we all know that even the 8 tons in this country, as in the UK, for example, we need to still go down because we're still emitting too much. Obviously, if you all buy SUVs with 25, that's 3 times the amount for the annual consumption, we will have a bit of a problem. So I think it's comparing things to people that they can understand then.
Okay, well, I think that's really important. So just remind us what's the average person in tons carbon dioxide?
Also in the UK, for example, it's 8 tons. In Canada or the US, it would be 15 tons per person. And as I say, the SUV is 25 tons, but only for buying it, not driving it.
Okay, all right. Thank you for that. So, so Petra, you have written Sustainability Management and the Handbook of Carbon Management, and which are really useful booklets, actually. I mean, I've had a look at them. But climate literacy is complex. We need as many people as possible to understand the core issues. Can you give me 3 takeaways, 3 statements, if you like, that will help create greater understanding?
Yeah, I think first of all, it is every employee can do and every person can do it, because often we have the feeling it's the senior management or the environmental manager, but everyone can do it. So whatever even if you are just starting in a company and you're on the lowest level, you can do something about it. I think this is really, really important. It's the first thing. Everyone can do something.
Everyone
Then
can
I
do
think,
something.
yeah. And then I think it is also choose the best high impact solution. Also don't waste your time on the tiny things. Choose the best high impact solution. And I think the handbook of carbon management, we have tried for every area, wherever you are working in a company, for example, to give you 5 high impact solutions, like for transport or 5 for food, for example. So choose the best ones there. And then obviously focus on your, as a third one would be consider your sphere of influence. A lot of people think, oh, I don't have any influence. I can't, I'm only a tiny person, kind of. Everyone has a sphere of influence. It's good to know where is yours and how can you make the most out of it. So choose the best solution with the highest amount of people you can reach. And I think this would be my 3 things.
Thank you very much, Petra. And just one more question for which I do require a tragically short reply. It often seems to me that the words that are missing from the discourse are risk and probability. You can't say that climate change caused such and such a fire or such and such a drought, but you can say that the probability is greater, or there is increased risk of a drought or a fire, which I think are quite difficult concepts to express sometimes. Any sort of thoughts about that?
Yeah, no, I think I as in my personal opinion, I would say just let us take that we had 40 years of this discussion where we always said, so how possible is it that the glaciers will melt and how much will they melt and so on. We have now images, we have satellite images where we can see all the glaciers in the world have melted, whatever the probability was anyone calculated. So I think what I would really personally think, okay, let's accept that there is a high probability that it will all go further downhill, and just let's focus all our energy and our brain power, because we can only do so much on the solutions and doing the best ones.
Okay, thank you for that, Petra. Thank you very much indeed. You are staying on now, but I'm disappearing. So Raj is going to come on and he's going to have a quick chat with you. I'm going to disappear. Enjoy your chat, and I'll see you again in about 4 or 5 minutes.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Hi, Petra. So, Petra, my first question to you would be, you are the editor of the book on sustainable management, a guide for faculty and students. So what prompted you to write the book? If you could share that with us.
Yeah, back in 2014, I was responsible for integrating sustainability and the SDGs in all the different disciplines in the business school, so in accounting, marketing, and so on. So I was trying to help my colleagues on how to do it in their training. And I was looking for a book which would actually help me, because I couldn't, at this point I had, when someone said in marketing, okay, I'm happy to do it now, give me something what I should do, I could give him 20 books and he could actually, and the person would say, oh, I don't have time to read actually 20 books, can you make it easier for me? So I thought I need to find something which is easier. I looked for this and I couldn't find it. So when I actually at this time to this publisher, who then actually published the Routledge, who published my book at the end. They said, we know it's missing. Can you write it? Can you have it tomorrow? And I couldn't have it tomorrow, but within a year it was there. And I think it was something I needed for my work. And then I was told loads of people did need it as well. So it was really missing in the book market.
Sure, thank you. So can you just briefly tell our audience about the different chapters of the book and what topics you have focused on?
As what we have done in this book is really to go through all the disciplines in a business school, but obviously if you're, for example, in a company, it would be also relevant to you. So we have, for example, something on sustainable marketing. We have a chapter on economics. We have something on, obviously, Raj's chapter as well on reporting and so on. So we have for every discipline, we have a chapter, but then we have also some more generic ones. We have, for example, something on crowdsourcing. We have something on systems thinking, because I think it's really, really important how to actually bring all the different systems together. So there's a whole chapter dedicated to it. And we have a chapter on greenhouse gas management, also how to reduce carbon emissions, which I think is very important. And the nice thing is that if you're in a company and or you want to train yourself or you want to train someone else, there are actually 48 ready-made seminars or workshops, as like 1 hour workshops for you in the book. So you can just take it, go into a room and deliver it to 20 people or 50 or whatever you have there and bring it across without having so much preparation.
Brilliant, thank you. So my third question would be, the first edition came in the year 2014.
Mm-hmm.
And so what changed between then and the launch of the third edition in 2023? So it has almost been 10 years, 9 years.
Yeah. So when we actually, after the second edition, they did actually ask the people actually, what would you like to have in the book? Do you still want it? And what would you like to see in it? And everyone was saying there's not enough on climate change in it. So we actually had already greenhouse gas management in the book, and we were teaching it since 2014. But what the request really from the market was, can we actually have climate solutions in every single chapter? So what we have done with the third edition is we have kind of updated it. What can we do in marketing? What can we do in reporting? What can we do in economics and so on with regards to the climate crisis? So this is a big difference in the third edition. Besides updating everything, obviously, the links and everything you need to do.
Brilliant, thank you. And my final question to you would be, how can organizations increase their contribution towards reducing global warming?
How can organizations? I think for me the most important is really that everyone understands that you can do something in everything. So it's kind of really not only as a board or someone up top or someone at the side like the environmental manager who has to implement it. It needs, every single person needs to understand. It needs to go through the organization really to everyone. And everyone needs to do what their part is. Or sometimes they can also develop new ideas. So I think it's often underestimated how someone who knows their job very well, and you then do a climate training with them and then say, so what do you think you can change within your job? And they have brilliant ideas. So I think everybody can suddenly come up with something people higher up might not have thought about. And suddenly the person doing this job realize, oh, I can have an impact here. And I think this is important that everybody does this. And then obviously, hopefully all the emissions from everyone, because we have to halve them by 2030. As we have to have half the emissions by 2030 worldwide, which is a big ask, and every organization has to do it.
Brilliant. So my follow-up question to that would be, this is the era of new technologies like blockchain, artificial intelligence, and so on. So how do you think AI or other technologies could help us tackle the climate crisis?
Yeah, I think AI is a bit of a twofold one. On one hand, it causes a lot of carbon emission when you teach a computer what to do, but it might be worthwhile depending on what you teach a computer. If you just teach them the computer rubbish, I think I wouldn't develop the AI. But if you kind of develop actually, for example, teach train the computer with all the kind of possibilities on how to solve climate change, all the climate solutions, and you would develop something which very fast then, as for a company, they can go into the system and actually ask the computer, here, this is our problem, what is the solution for it? And it immediately can put something up which a human might not be able to do because it is drawing on so much information, and it had learned something, maybe made its own creative connections between different solutions. I think this is where I see the big potential in AI actually helping to solve climate change.
Thank you, Petra. It was great discussing this with you. Over to you, Michael.
Thank you very much, guys. So now Kevin is going to have a chat with Raj. We are running over. Sorry about that, but we'll carry on until we finished. But before you start chatting to Raj, Kevin, Raj, I believe you wanted to say a little bit more about the climate change in India story we were discussing earlier.
Sure. So see, this is a map that I got from one of the climate change portals. And this basically shows the changes in mean temperature in the year 2050. So as you can see, most of India is in red. That means there will be a climate hazard in terms of heat wave, which will have cascading effects on human health and whatnot. So this is one. And the other one I wanted to show you, everyone knows about Mumbai. So in the city of Bombay, this is just one part of the city, which is going to be completely inundated with seawater. So the sea will take over some of the land that we have now and have our buildings, have our infrastructure, have our assets, and these are projected to go underwater by 2050. So climate crisis is very much real. It's very much real in India. But also, I would highlight that the government, the local government, municipalities, they are gearing up for this. So you can check what they're doing in your locality, and it will be good, confidence booster for them if you sort of collaborate with them also. Thank you. I just wanted to show these two maps.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Now I'm going to disappear. Kevin and Raj are going to talk for a few minutes. Please stay with us. We are running a few minutes late. We've got about 5 or 6 minutes to go. I'm going to go away. Kevin and Raj, over to you.
Raj, hi. It's probably off the back of the imminent threats that you've got from climate change to people in India that you developed a conceptual model of sustainability management. Why did you do it? What is it for?
Sure. Certainly. So thank you for the question. So you see, we know about the triple bottom line concept, don't we? It encompasses planet, people, and profit. I was always intrigued by the thought, how does a company manage all of these three areas of performance, of sustainable development? That is, how can they ensure profitability while also creating value for the environment and the society simultaneously? So that question led me to the creation of the sustainability management control model, which is now under copyright application in India, which I did for my PhD thesis. So here I studied the primary management controls that are typically found in large businesses. So management controls are, so what is a management control? So management controls are those that are employed by organizations to ensure corporate goals are adhered to and for goal congruency. The typically found management controls in large companies include cultural controls, strategic planning controls, budgetary controls, performance management controls, rewards and compensation-based controls, administrative and organizational design-based controls, as well as governance controls. So what I did for my PhD thesis, I designed the management controls for sustainability by adapting each of the 7 control mechanisms for sustainability management. That is, each of the controls will generate both financial and non-financial values if these are designed in a certain way. So financial value in terms of profit, social values in the form of value generation for non-shareholder investor stakeholder groups, and for the environment by regenerative practices. So if we were to redesign and readapt our management controls in a certain way, it will help us promote the triple bottom line much more effectively and efficiently.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm no expert in this field, but I understand that there are other conceptual models out there. What makes yours different or better from everybody else's?
This is basically about how to manage sustainability in a company. So each of the 7 elements of the management control framework that I mentioned, these are interdependent. For example, we need cultural controls to establish the value proposition of a company and the ethical platform upon which a company is founded. We need strategic planning controls for materiality assessments, or the one we were discussing before about SASB materiality assessment, target setting. We need to set budgets for each of the three aspects of the triple bottom line, that is budgets for regenerative practices, and to fund both capital intensive and operational expenditures that are sustainable. For example, low cost, low emission sustainable technologies. We also need to align the reward and compensation systems to account for each of the three elements of sustainable development, so as to ensure the employees work not only for generating profits, but also for social and environmental value generation, and that they are adequately compensated for these. Likewise, the KPIs for the performance management controls need to be carefully picked. GRI and SASB readily comes with KPIs that organizations can use to monitor their progress. And then we need governance and administrative controls in the form of the CEO having direct responsibility, board level committees, risk management, chief risk officer, chief sustainability officer to drive sustainable decision making. So we do have a large number of conceptual frameworks like the triple bottom line. So I developed my framework to see how companies can manage sustainability internally, so that all the other elements can come together, like the GRI, like the SASB, and any other standards. Because if you do not have management controls or control over your activities and your actions and your decision-making process, you may not be in a position to implement sustainable development goals, as well as manage sustainability, manage environment, manage social interests in a effective manner.
Yeah, I mean, this is, I think we've already touched on this today, but this is an incredibly complex and complicated set of problems
Absolutely.
to engage in. And when I read your paper, I got the impression that you were talking about large companies, corporations,
Absolutely.
companies that have the capacity to do all of this stuff. But
Absolutely, yeah.
when we're doing these things, and I think this applies quite generally to ESG and regulation, we're leaving SMEs out in the cold. Yeah, I'm sure many of the people on the webinar today will work in SMEs, will be concerned to move things forward. What do you have to say based on your model to these people in SMEs who are struggling to get their head around all of this stuff and to make progress?
Sure. So there are two things. One is scope 3 emissions. So when we are talking about scope 3 emissions of large companies, we are necessarily talking about or reflecting about their supply chain, their value chain. The value chain actors would be maybe composed of MSMEs as well as SMEs. Now, the scope 3 emission of a large company will depend very much upon how these small companies or small to medium-sized enterprises manage their sustainability, right? So this model may not be fully applicable for a small company, but a small company will have governance mechanisms in place to manage sustainability. Small companies will have performance management systems. So what I'm saying is, out of these 7 management controls, there will be 2 or 3 management controls that SMEs and MSMEs readily adopt, and they just have to redesign these controls to suit the sustainability strategies that they follow. So it's very important for small and medium in a scale industry companies to adopt sustainability, because at the top of the value chain, the large companies, they are reliant on the small companies to reduce their emissions in total.
I think we're at the beginning of a very long journey. Thank you for that.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, guys. We are drawing to the close now. We have got 3 questions. I'm just going to ask each of you to ask 1 question each, but I'm going to ask you for a 30-second reply. Sorry about that. Scott Sifwright says, I suspect ESG is a very interlinked and complex, more than just a complicated one. Complicated problems need experts and experience, but complex ones need experiments and new thinking to navigate. I think at times we underestimate the connectedness. What do the panel think? I'm just going to ask one of you to answer that question. Any volunteers? 30 seconds.
I can have a go. Yes, they are all connected. I think part of the problem is that we're all brought up with linear forms of thinking, but the world is a much more complex place. And the interconnectedness of all these issues is the most complex of how we respond to the polycrisis that we're in. Yes, we need to understand what's happened to glaciers. Yes, we need to understand about CO2. Yes, we need to understand about transitions. But putting it all together is the most complicated challenge that we face.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to ask for an even shorter reply to this one. John B. People forget about the second law of thermodynamics when they buy electric cars. Oh, it's a long time since I've read about the second law of thermodynamics. We need science, physics, literacy too. I think this is a question about entropy. Anyone fancy the entropy question?
Yeah, no, I think this is right. I think when I do the climate change science, it's a natural science, because there is really a lot of research that people don't have the basic understanding from the natural science. So it's really kind of explaining what is a carbon cycle, also really lots of basic things kind of. So I think this is really important, and I fully agree that we need a lot of science, more science training there.
Okay, thank you for that. And still, last question, Sylvia G. I understand with the impact on EV, on electric vehicles, but is it not also a good way to move away from fossil fuels? Otherwise, people will continue to buy normal cars. I'm not hopeful that there'll be more innovation making our cars more effective. Yeah. I think, Petra, that's probably one for you.
If I can take it. Sorry. Can I take this one as well? Because I think I think it is good to buy electric cars, but it's important to buy small electric cars. And I think this is what often people don't understand. Don't buy the SUVs and suddenly go all for electric SUVs. I think the good solution, a fantastic solution, is buy small electric cars.
Okay. Is an electric...
Can I just chip in? Sorry, can I just chip in?
Yeah.
Other than buying electric cars, what we also need to think about is circular economy, principles of circular economy. So after the useful time of a EV, how is it dismantled? How do we recover the resources that has gone into making that EV? So that we need to also think about the circular economy.
Okay, indeed, especially with recycling of the lithium batteries and so on and so forth. Yeah. One question, quick question, Petra, very quick. Is an electric SUV a cleaner option than an internal combustion engine SUV?
And not when you buy it, but when you drive it over 100,000 miles. So actually, you've got to travel 100,000 miles. I think at the beginning, you're emitting so much that it's really not a good idea. So I think it's really, we need to go for small electric cars.
Only maybe if you're a very heavy driver and you drive an awful lot. Okay, thank you very much, guys. Thank you very much. We are so over today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. See you next week when we've got 3 fantastic guests. We're talking about brands and communications. See you then, and thank you and goodbye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye, everyone.